Yo, what's up?
Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast.
Welcome back. Steven, what's up, man? How have you been?
Oh, I've just been fantastic, Akko. It has been a little too long.
Come on. I feel like you keep saying that.
When I say a little too long, it's like when someone holds up like their fingers together, but they really mean like a mile. It's been far too long since we've done this.
It has been, but nevertheless, we are here and we are live and we're excited for this conversation we have opened up today. So we actually have a really, really amazing guest that we have in store for us. So without further ado, Justin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yo. It has been way too long because we were supposed to do this a while ago. But I am so glad to be here. And amazing may be a strong word, but I will definitely use it for these two here. These two guys I've known for a little while, better than I expected. And I'm really excited for this conversation.
What's the conversation we're going to be having?
So,
are you excited?
It's been a while since we talked about it last, but the topic of the conversation really is, what does faith mean? What does it mean to have faith? And more specifically, evidence-based faith,
Okay.
which I would argue is really what Jesus preached all throughout his 3 years of ministry and what the disciples took afterwards as well.
Okay. That sounds interesting. Sorry, Stephen, but I kind of just want to take a quick pause and like kind of rewind and go back because this is such a really like heavy and meaty topic that we're going to talk about today. So with that being said, I kind of want to give the audience some respect and have you introduce yourself, Justin, and kind of explain, okay, why is this topic important to you? What's your background in, how have you come to know the Lord, and kind of what you bring to this conversation and why, some of our audience should be listening today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to experience God. I came to Christ when I was 6 years old. This would have been December 10th of 98, which is...
98? You were 6?
I was 6.
Bro, I wasn't even a year old.
I was 0 years old.
What the heck?
And so that walk, like I grew up in church, and I absolutely love my church, Antioch Bible Baptist, over in Gladstone. And I was quite blessed that my family made sure and made it a priority, mostly my mom. And throughout that church, I had a lot of inspiring leaders who really preached the word and such. And even through my senior year, they made it a point to explain like really how we can know who God is. But they didn't really go into apologetics so much. But we did study creation as is, what certain parts might mean as far as the kinds, the ark, the ice age, dinosaurs, the flood. A lot of those details that sometimes we dismiss or set back of a secondary or tertiary issue. And it's not exactly foundational. We can have whatever belief we want about it. The main thing is Christ, which is true to a degree. And I say to a degree because how we view Genesis and other parts really reflects how we view God. And that didn't come together for me till I was in college. I went to Missouri University of Science and Technology for a double major mechanical and aerospace engineering, which is a fancy way of saying I went to the Missouri Engineering School for rocket science. Which is hilarious when people say it's not rocket science, because I get to laugh at myself. But a lot of it was like I really got involved in worship, in FCC, EF, BSU, a few other organizations, and one of our missionaries at the Baptist Student Union. Words are hard.
Acronyms are hard too.
Acronyms are very hard.
I might have you explain them here.
Absolutely. Actually brought back a DVD series called Unlocking the Mysteries of Genesis. And so it was a 12-part series, 20-minute videos, all put on by the Institute Creation Research, which was really like a step-by-step explanation of what we can scientifically explain and analyze and understand about how God created the universe and creation. And it was a really insightful area. I led a few guys through a study of it. Afterwards, I actually took it with me. And I led another Bible study group through it as well. And just prior to doing so, I wanted a lot of that background information that I didn't feel like I had. Plate tectonics, some of the dinosaurs' kinds, what the families were like, how everything could fit on the ark, some of these other things. And it really appealed to me because of my degree. I did have to understand some of the assumptions that go into scientific analysis about, or experimental analysis of, say, you have a set of boundary conditions, you have a model in which to explain what the results should be. You start top to bottom, and you run with it. And in some of the specifically like origin of life stuff with with evolutionary models, there are a lot of assumptions. And having that background, I looked at those and said, I can't believe this until I know more about it. Like it became something I felt I could sit against and really talk about with other people who just don't know that background information. Like, scientists say this, they're the experts, I should default to what that position is, which generally is the safe option.
Exactly. I hear
And having doing that, I dove into apologetics and really the deep parts of it and watched way too many things.
Can you give me a quick definition of apologetics?
That's
Absolutely.
funny because that's literally that was my first question for the audience. I was like, Justin, we gotta break this down. Like, what is apologetics?
Yeah, absolutely. So apologetics is the fancy way of it comes from the root word apologia, which is really like to explain what you believe or what is your defense when you give something, which is really what was meant in 1 Peter 3:15. Be able to give a defense for the faith that you hold. It was also what I would say is what Jesus meant in John 3:12. If you do not understand earthly things, how would you understand heavenly things? Which is another basis of why being able to explain and have a rooted foundation in what we believe is a way for us to reach people who need that earthly understanding before they could ever possibly be open to a heavenly understanding or a spiritual understanding.
That's awesome. So, Stephen, can I safely say that we are having a conversation today? We're blessed to have a conversation today with a rocket scientist. That also happens to be a Christian.
Yes. We are extraordinarily blessed. Man, when you said engineering, I was like, man, my head went up into the clouds. And I was like, I definitely can't reach space. That's why I don't have that degree.
Space is scary. Don't go there. I don't
scary.
recommend it.
Yeah.
Wait, have you been?
No. Dude, I'm afraid of heights. That's the best part about this.
But wouldn't you not know up from down in space?
So, as soon as you leave, and this is a side tangent, but as soon as you leave like a gravitational field, essentially you don't have an up and down. You have to revert to a different type of coordinate system.
Yeah.
So on Earth, you have an XYZ, or you have the Cartesian coordinate system, XYZ.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to go left, right, up, down. Yeah.
Like you have a paradigm.
Right.
Yeah.
When they launch a rocket, which is one of the hardest things, because you have specific windows where you can launch, which is why it's so infrequent, and half of it's cloud cover, because when a rocket takes off straight from what we see, and very quickly it goes almost parallel with the Earth's surface, or tangential is what I should say, to reach eventually its orbit.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's extremely low visibility on average by atmospheric conditions. And then there's also a lot of their worry tends to be satellite orbits, primarily geostationary and along the equator. And then you have varying low Earth and high Earth orbits, which I think is like Lagrange 3 and 4.
Lagrange.
Which are just points between like Earth, Moon, and something else.
You sure that's not like a French makeup company?
So, ironically...
Hey, you got that Lagrange on?
Dude, I love that color. That's definitely 7.
That's funny.
Which is just fancy ways of saying, like, we have to get a rocket into space. We can only do it at this time.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's wrong. Don't hit the metal flying in space. Great. And we have to go this high. Perfect.
Yeah. Man.
That's a lot, man.
All of it.
What an introduction.
I did not think about at all. Oh my goodness.
Oh man, I'm glad to have you, man, and I'm excited for this conversation. And
I get to talk about this often, so yeah, you're more than welcome. Ask whatever you'd like, and I'll try to dig out whatever I remember.
Well, before we actually dive into it, the thing I want to ask the audience is, are you actually flying away from the Earth, or are you just falling into eternity, like into space forever?
Yes. The answer is yes. So, actually, in orbit...
here we go. You actually have an answer.
No, in orbit, you are falling... So, okay, the moon.
Yeah.
We're just going to say the moon. It's roughly stationary orbit, at least the distance. Now, technically, and this is the same thing with the ball. If you were ball on a string and you twirl it, if you do it vertically, especially at the top, it is attempting to fall down. So if you hold the string is up, ball's at the top, it's going in this vertical circle.
Yeah.
It is attempting to fall down because of gravity, but the velocity that it carries, its momentum, is tangential because of the force in the string pulling it tight.
Okay.
So you get a centrifugal force. Centrifugal. Whereas
Centripetal force.
Centripetal. Oh, both. Or both.
But the force be with you.
That's
all I was thinking.
Yes. So technically, yes, it's falling, but it's also moving forward. So the point that it hits is you can do it in a square of one forward and one down. And then continuously as it attempts to make this, as it makes this circle.
I see. Goodness gracious.
Random stuff.
It's not so much. See? I'm so glad I didn't go to that that side of mathematics. I would have been so confused.
It's not important. Half of it's not important.
Half the audience are like, what
Are we really talking about faith yet?
Nah, it's fun. It's good, man. And Justin, like, first and foremost, I've known you for the better part of over a year, and I remember even our earliest conversations, it was always embedded on not just curiosity and wisdom when it comes to just science and mathematics and all these different things, but also how all that stuff bleeds into the Bible, and honestly how the Bible inspires all these different things. You know, like science and the Bible are not two different entities, and that's actually part of the conversation we're gonna kind of attempt to have today. So that being said, I'm curious, Stephen and Justin, as we go into our conversations, man, like, where do we want to start? I think you were kind of hinting at it when you were giving us the intro, but how do you want to kind of carry this conversation as we go on today and kind of interpret just our understanding, the belief, the faith that we have, or even the faith that other people may have, and all that stuff being said?
Yeah. So I guess my first question or statement prompt might be, when we think of faith, what does the word mean? And then secondly, how does that relate to belief? And how does that relate to trust? And I ask this because oftentimes Jesus asks, who do you say that I am? What do you believe I am? And in our daily lives, we have a worldview or a faith-based system and how we approach everything. Now, as a famous psychologist has once said, what does it mean to believe? Is it the words that you say or the actions? Which he followed with, it's obviously, if your actions match your words, you are a fully integrated person. I can trust that what you say is what you will do. Because we've often heard the saying, do what I say, not what I do. Especially parents to kids, like, I know better, but I'm not doing that. Listen to the words that I have for you, which is an incongruency. It's not a true belief in or a faith or a trust in the idea that you have. And we do this all the time. And sometimes it becomes, quote unquote, a blind faith, which is what Jesus very often argued against. Paul says the same thing. Like, if we find Jesus' body, if he did not rise, our faith is worthless.
Okay, so let's kind of take a mini step back and kind of start.
Let's go.
So like, okay, so you mentioned what is faith and what does it mean to believe. So Stephen, I want to start with you and see, your definition, and maybe take a couple of things from your definition to make my definition. But what would you say, or how would you respond to those questions that Justin is implying? Like, what does it mean to have faith, or what is faith? And then also, what is, believing, or the idea of believing, and do those two things have anything to do with each other, or nothing to do with each other?
Oh, for sure. Man, this is going to be super hard to explain. Because
that's why I'm starting with you.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, man, when you first introduced, like, this thought of, like, comparing the three, like, in my head, I'm grouping belief and faith together a lot of times. But if I'm thinking, like, in a layman's, or even just, like, people, if I went to someone, like, on the street, like, I think most of the time belief is, like you could almost say like common sense things or general trends that people just like kind of understand. And then a lot of times people will put faith usually in a religious context. I think that's, at least in America, that's the way it gets used the most. I don't usually hear a lot of people say like, I have faith in you. Most people just say like, I trust you. You know, but faith seems to be one of the words that, yeah, just is thrown around in a lot of religious contexts. And so, so I would say like a lot of what faith and belief is, at least in the way it gets used, is more of your understanding of the ability, well, see, I'm talking about an individual. Gosh dang it, this is so hard. But at least for me, like if I say I have faith in God,
what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah.
Like to you, what is
like
faith?
If I say like the difference for me between like, if I have a belief in God, I would say, hey, I have an understanding of like, at least I think, understanding of who he is and some of his characteristics, or at least I think I know his characteristics, right? And then let's say like, I say like, I have faith in God. I mean, you could go two ways with that. Be like, hey, I have faith in what he's actually done throughout history, right? There's that side of things in terms of like, at least in the Bible we read in like the Old Testament, it's like, hey, I have faith that he actually did that. And I can be like, hey, that's one side of it, because there's some pretty strong evidence of like, you know, what he's done for people throughout history, right? There's the other side of things of where when Jesus comes along and says like, hey, there's this way like to heaven, you got like trust in my words, right? And so there's the other side of faith is like, will you have faith in the words that someone says to you and bank like your life on this? So, and that's where it kind of starts to tie into trust. Is trust in my head is whatever your understanding of someone else's ability to affect you, or what they say they're going to do for you or lack thereof, you're saying, I believe this will be the outcome.
Okay.
Right? So
I see.
Like if someone's like not a very good, like, cause everyone trusts everybody, right? And I'm going to explain that as I can say, like if someone is a habitual like shoplifter, I can say I trust them to constantly steal.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay.
Right.
So there's a trust factor that everyone places on someone, and that could differentiate within that specific individual. But the idea of that trust is always going to be there for everyone.
Yeah, because your trust is built upon, at least in my opinion, your trust or whatever you're trusting is a repeatability of something occurring or a characteristic being displayed.
Would you say then it's like a response?
Trust?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So the example I try to give of trust is like, okay, so this is the example I give a lot of times is the chair that I'm sitting on. My understanding of it right now is it's something like you're supposed to sit on, and it can prop me up. It keeps me off the floor. I'm also supposed to like sometimes eat at dinner, and I sit on a chair. That's my belief. And I'm trusting it won't break when I sit down on it. So because of the chair's ability to hold me off the ground and my desire not to be on the ground, I'm going to trust it to not break.
Okay. Wow, I didn't think you were going to go there already, but it's good. No, it definitely causes someone or allows someone, and I hope the audience is feeling the same way I am, to just think and ponder on some of the words that you're saying. And I think for me, before I get too much into the weeds, I want to define it honestly very simply. For me, faith and belief, before I touch on trust. Faith defines trust just as much as, oh my goodness, I keep saying trust. Faith defines belief just as much as belief defines faith. And what I mean by that is to have faith in something, right, is to have a complete trust or a complete belief that that thing that you're putting your faith on is true. To believe in something is to have faith that that thing or that circumstance or whatever that situation or that person is true. Belief and truth, I think, is or belongs in the same playground. You have to find something to be true in order for you to believe in it, right? And I think your
dancing around
your examples imply that, the shoplifter, if you trust that the shoplifter has a record, that they've been shoplifting, like 6-7 times in their record, then you will believe that they're probably going to do it again, right? Or in your chair example, if your chair, ever since you sat in your first chair, that this is what you do on a chair, and you've built that trust, you know that you're going to go in sitting on that chair the next time with full belief that it's going to support you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, you don't even have a self-awareness that
It's
you are
like
putting your trust or faith into it. It's all subconscious because we can't process everything.
Yeah.
We have a few different levels of consciousness.
We just talked about that. Sorry.
No, absolutely. I was actually talking about this a couple weeks ago. And the forefront, or the one that often comes to mind, is not something that is... It's not what usually comes as far as something that's repeated. Your belief foundation, the newer ones that you don't feel to know or truly believe, are ones you're most cautious about, the ones you're most aware of. Sitting on the chair that you've had for a year, that you've done 100,000 times, is not something you're going to think about ever.
Yeah.
And this oftentimes is because you put trust in it and maybe trust in the people around you to not pull a prank and loosen all the legs.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, and sorry if
that's a good idea though. We should loosen all the screws.
With that, it begs me to kind of have a mini question of what comes first. Does your belief come first, or does your faith comes first? How would you respond to that?
So,
or is it something? Is it irrelevant to even ask that?
I think it's completely relevant, and I don't think it's asked often enough. But I might say something slightly differently. We have your two definitions. I don't know exactly where mine lies as far as faith versus trust, and belief versus even knowledge, because as you said, oftentimes we hold beliefs as being true. Now, we may not know everything about it. For example, I know very little, in all honesty, about rocket trajectories at this point because I've forgotten a lot. I know you can only have a 2-stage rocket, and that's the most efficient that it will ever be by mathematics. Now, I am trusting in the equations that I use. I am trusting in the knowledge handed down to me, or I'm having faith in the professor to be fully knowledgeable and have fact-checked his presentation such that I should accept it as truth.
I will say on that opens up another kind of can of worms. We're not gonna go there today, but to just kind of give the audience where my mind is going is, you mentioned you trust that a professor is giving you valid and tangible information that is truthful. Well, I can't say that's 100%. The reality of the universities and the school systems that are in our day and age in 2023. True. I open the news, or I open social media, or open YouTube, and I don't even spend 5 minutes and I see a case of just what's happening in education right now with the whole ideology of gender and misconceptions about gender and all these different things. So I think that's a can of worms that I don't want to leave open too long. We're going to revisit that maybe at a later episode. But that also kind of goes in alignment of a friend unscrewing the hinges of a chair when you've believed that this chair has supported you hundreds and thousands of times before, but now you don't know how that's going to come into play, because in the back of your mind, you're not thinking about it, but in the front of your mind, you're like, oh, what if this could happen? And I think...
And when you do that, you judge, what's the likelihood? You have the initial thought of, oh, what if this happens? Maybe it's I have something important to do tomorrow. What if my car doesn't start? Half the time, you dismiss that rather quickly. I haven't had an issue with it for weeks, or you just had an issue with it yesterday. That becomes a very different analysis of how much faith should I put in this? How much trust should I put in my car that the battery will turn over in the morning? Do I need to make arrangements before the morning in case?
Yeah. Steven, I'm gonna side it over to you with this question.
Oh boy.
If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe with your heart that God raised him from the grave, you'll be saved. This is Romans chapter 10, verse 9, right?
Yeah.
So confessing with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, that kind of assumes that you have faith to confess that Jesus is Lord. And then believing in your heart that God raised him from the grave.
A saving faith.
Exactly. And for you guys that maybe are wondering why I mentioned that verse, that's actually the gospel verse. That's the verse to turn you from death to life, to reunite you into the kingdom of God through his son Jesus Christ, and that's how we have access to the Lord, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why I bring that verse up, Romans chapter 10, verse 9, confessing usually gives the assumption of you have faith in something, therefore you are communicating to it out loud that, hey, I was wrong, and this thing that I'm confessing to is actually right. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and then believe with your heart that God raised him from the grave. So I guess it goes back to the question I asked Justin, like, does faith come before belief, or does belief come before faith, or are they two completely different things, or are they the same thing? What do you think?
Oh my God. This is so frustrating. Okay. Does belief become before faith? I'm just going to run like in biblical context. I think that's all I can do right now because I'm not very smart. My brain is already melting in this conversation. This is the way I'll roll with it today. And maybe tomorrow I'll just be totally wrong. But I would say the belief becomes before faith, at least in context of that question and that verse that you just gave me. So in terms of Romans 10:9, it says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that, God raised him from the dead, that very first section is, obviously it does say believe, right, in the second part of it, but we've talked about belief having like knowledge of truth. Well, in order to confess anything, you're supposed to be telling the truth, right? Like which the context I'm thinking, like going to like a confessional, like in Catholic faith, you're supposed to tell the whole truth. And so basically what the verse is saying is you have to say that it is true. And what are you saying that is true? The belief that Jesus is Lord, right? That's your belief, right? I know the word, the second half it says believe that God raised him from the dead, but in a lot of ways, and I think this is where it's difficult, is belief is oftentimes used in ways of like, oh, based on my knowledge and what I can see and visualize, right? But faith, in like one of the definitions, at least obviously I didn't say it before, is your commitment to something even though it's unseen. Right? So in that context, at least within your question in the verse, I would say belief comes before faith.
Okay. I'm trying to fully understand where you're coming from, because I think my road is blocking, because I would say faith comes with your, and then your belief comes, because like you just said in that definition, and it's funny because I pulled up the Webster dictionary, or I guess this is Oxford dictionary, so I don't know if there's any too much of a difference there, but it says faith, the first definition is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. And I think you just added that sometimes that someone or something might not have already happened or might not have happened yet. That's why you have faith. And I think we can find scripture that says, man, like, blessed is the person that has faith in the things that are not yet seen, right? So what I would say is, okay, so if faith can sometimes involve some things that are not seen, and then on the other side of that coin, the term belief means accepting that a statement or something is true. That's something that means that something is existing and something is real.
Okay.
So I would say then you have a belief, because think of, for example, like if somebody comes to you and let's say I stole at Walmart yesterday, right? And Justin came and said, "Oh my goodness, like Akko stole candy at Walmart yesterday," and I tell you, "Hey, like I actually didn't." You wouldn't believe me, or you might believe me, but up until you see that actually yesterday I didn't steal anything and he was just making up something, then you would believe me, because you would find evidence that the thing that I said is true versus the thing that he said was a lie, right? It would be once you find that I'm actually truthful, then you would believe in me, right? And then your response would be like, "Oh, Akko, I believe you," right? And that's usually how we use that term commonly. Yeah. So I guess with that, I'm gonna push it to you, I guess, because I know you're excited to respond.
Absolutely.
And the audience too. I want you guys to respond as you're listening to this. Either talk to each other, or put in the comments, or just call somebody and ask them about it. But I don't know. I just think that you have faith in something, because faith that something or someone could be real, or it could exist or could not exist yet. And then once you have that faith, then you can have belief once it becomes real. And that's why it says, confess with your mouth, have faith that Jesus is Lord, and then believe in your heart because you saw God raise him from the dead. But I don't know. Back to you. Back to you, Justin.
So I wouldn't say faith in my version.
No, it doesn't. That's why I said I didn't say that.
Okay.
Confess again.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, right. I don't want to say that it says faith.
Right.
I'm just assuming. It's an assumption.
Oh, okay.
And I love that train of thought,
saying,
and I agree with that last bit as well, because I think oftentimes, especially in the English, the faith, belief, and trust are often synonymous.
Oh, for sure.
We use it interchangeably. For example, I believe Akko, or I believe what he's saying, but I don't know if I trust him. There can be like this conflation of two competing ideas, and I don't know until I have evidence for one or the other.
Or you could say, like, I have faith, like going into a soccer game or into a game. You could say, like, my mom could say, "Oh, I have faith in you," knowing darn well that I'm going to go into that game and get whooped 10-0.
But she's just lying then. That's not a really great example. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
That's like what people said.
But maybe
she's saying it in something that hasn't happened yet, right? But,
I think faith, because it has a religious context, or because oftentimes it is of something that hasn't happened yet. Faith is often of, as said, something not yet seen. It is usually in the future. I have faith something will happen, which in that context to me feels like I believe it and I'm trusting in that because of who it is or what it is. I have trust or some reassurance. And what I want to touch on is, along this line, I think it becomes more tangible when we go to evidence of faith, trust, beliefs, etc. And then afterwards, like what those foundations are. Because if you know what the foundation is, you should know what the result is, and then vice versa.
I like that.
So I would ask, we're all Christians. We've been in the faith. We understand it. I'm curious what you guys believe the atheistic definition of faith often is.
Oh, no.
That's kind of where I was hinging to when I was asking you guys, because I knew that all our answers would have been our bias, because we have a faith in an ultimate being. We have faith in God. So ultimately, when we're defining it, we're going to define it because of the source of what we believe in, right?
Yeah.
So back to you, Steven.
Akko knows. He knows. When you said this earlier, I was like, honestly, I don't know, because I've never just gone up.
Yeah.
No one's just going around like, "Oh, I'm an atheist," and then me going up and asking like, "All right, what's the definition of faith?" Like, I didn't do that. So I went to the very reliable source, Reddit.
What source?
Reddit.
That's the place. Find everything there.
Is that how you explain? Is that how you explain rocket science to us?
Sometimes, yeah. Actually,
I have a confession. Back in the day,
oh boy,
when I was in high school and like beginning of college, to watch my soccer games, I would find streams on Reddit. I have subscriptions now, and I can watch my soccer games in peace and pay the subscription for it. But I used to used to.
It's okay. I still use my
It's okay.
I still use my sister's Netflix account. I think everyone does. But here, these are some of the things I did see, and there's a lot of them I didn't add. And once I read them, I was like, okay, these actually do make sense. Like, this is actually what I've heard people say before. I just haven't heard it in a long time. A non-justification used to justify everything in relation to what does faith mean.
From an atheist perspective.
From an atheist perspective,
Okay.
they said a non-justification used to justify everything. They said it was wishful thinking. They said it was belief in something without evidence or proper evidence. And the last one was glorification of willful ignorance.
That third one.
I can read it again.
The faith without evidence is the one I've actually heard the most between debates between Christians and atheists when attempting to define terms.
So is it like right for me to assume that from an atheist perspective, faith is not a good, or not a good word, but it's not like a positive word?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything tangible because there's no evidence behind it from their perspective.
Gotcha. So it's almost like a mockery of a word.
It is.
Okay.
Instead of our perspective of the terms being essentially synonymous, they have it as completely different categories. And really, faith is just a religious concept for the reason they believe in something, a higher power outside of themselves.
You said it. Wishful thinking.
Exactly,
Yeah,
wishful thinking.
And I do actually want to jump in on this because, at least for me, I'm no rocket scientist, but I did study it. Like, I am in the science world. Like, I am part of, like, biology, chemistry, all of these things. And a lot of times when I heard conversations about Christianity doesn't have evidence, they always brought it back to the time when, like, okay, when people just didn't have the knowledge of how the world worked on a chemical level or a biological level, they would make up things to, like, try to explain things. And oftentimes it was wrong. Very true. And so there's a lot of backlash on people that people today hold on people in history. Where they say, like, bro, they're just dumb. They just made up stuff. But we've made so many advancements in our knowledge due to the scientific method. Right? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely correct.
So this is where I get a little frustrated and confused. Because even though the scientific method, you like start off with a hypothesis and it has to be repeatable, and then you get a result, and we know it to be true. Which there's a lot of cases where we have that, like, and I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds, but in organic chemistry we understand certain mechanisms of reactions because we've created conditions to where we can control it and know it to be true. Same thing with, like, proofs in math.
Exactly.
You do the same thing. Where I get frustrated or not necessarily in agreement is there's not a lot of strong evidence for why, like, sometimes even the body does the things that it does. So why do we have, like, our own individual thoughts, like in terms of psychology? Are we even, if we can repeat it, how do you repeat spontaneous, like, thought of realization of self? How is that possible? I mean, right now I'm learning about, this is really fun for the audience, I'm learning about, like, human reproduction right now. So I've gone through male and female anatomy. Super fun to look at different pictures. No, it's not. But there's a part of, like, the fertilization process where there's a time where it's a single cell. This is where the sperm is inside the egg. Giving a science lesson really quick. And what ends up happening, you have a cell that's basically like a stem cell, and it can become anything. That's literally, what we know to be true is stem cells can actually do anything. That's why actually we use it a lot in research. So my question is, like, if it can do anything, how does the body know to turn it into a baby? What dictates that? Because it can actually divide into anything, and some of those cells end up turning into the baby. Some of them end up turning into the placenta. There's no rhyme or reason for which one gets chosen, but the body knows that some of it has to be the baby, some of it has to do that. So something has designed that. So how can, at that molecular level, I say molecular, it's, it's just small, how can you just give that up to like random chance? Like, if that were really true, if there was no design, then man, so many pregnancies would fail. Like, it's actually unreal right now how many steps can fail. How come they don't fail more if someone didn't create a system?
I want to touch on all of that because I completely agree on several points. And before we go into the weeds on those individual questions, we should come back to foundations, and which is partially why I asked the question of what is faith? What does it mean to have faith? So by certain viewpoints, faith is essentially wishful thinking. By other viewpoints, it is a trust or belief based on something. So what is that something? So we often say evidence. And I will not say proof. I will never say proof because, as Stephen pointed earlier to mathematical proofs, I think mathematics or pure mathematics is the only place you can truly get proof. And a lot of, essentially, even with the scientific method, fantastic way of learning or attaining knowledge, it is not a one-to-one correlation. I did this. I set up a hypothesis. I ran the test. I have these initial conditions. I have these boundary conditions. I have these variables in which I'm testing against. I have the results. I have to interpret the results regardless of what it is. I have my own lens, my own worldview, and everything. I need to filter it all through. Now, if it's a one-to-one as far as, hey, I'm going to measure the temperature outside. I have 5 different gauges. Let's go see. Just that, yes, it's a measurement, but you are still trusting in the materials in the gauge, and you're testing that it's working properly by whoever manufactured it. You are also trusting the manufacturer did it correctly, otherwise you wouldn't be doing that. You would also have to trust that you calibrated them correctly. So some might read like 73.2, others 74.4, one's over 80. Okay, something's probably wrong with the gauge because of the other ones. It doesn't mean the others are technically right. And some of the minor variations may be because of a sun angle and some other stuff. There could be variables you haven't accounted for. And it sounds like a relatively simple test. I'm going to take these 5 thermometers, I'm going to walk outside, I'm going to see what they read after 10 minutes. There is still something you have to filter through that oftentimes we just assume a priori. Which is just to say, okay, I have these beliefs, they're true. I'm just assuming they're true from the beginning. That all of this stuff is correct, the gauges are correct, manufacturer, all those little details. I accounted for everything. Run the test, take the data, tell you what the results are. When it comes to worldviews and foundations, we do the exact same thing. Now, the difference between primarily atheism and theism, because all Christianity later, is you are starting with something a priori, essentially, or you're at least testing it. So, theism, you believe in a, we'll say, higher power, essentially a creator. I'll say singular, because otherwise it would be pantheism, panentheism, and some other things. So we'll say a single creator that is necessary for everything else. Atheism says God does not exist, or at least I do not believe God exists. Some people may say as atheists, well, I don't know that God exists. So how do we test that? Is it what you say, or is it what you do?
Or is it what you see?
Or what you see. Now, oftentimes, atheists or people, even agnostics, who say, I don't know, will act as if God does not exist. Meaning, what they said is not the same as how they act. They have a foundational difference from what they consciously think. I don't know, but I'm open to it. Are you really open to it? If you're open, are you looking? That's the real question.
Okay.
This could get, hairy so quick, and we don't have time for it.
Oh, I can't wait. Let's go.
We're gonna split this into two, so we have to.
We'll split it into two. So we're not gonna get too much into this episode.
I heard something.
So for you guys listening in, you guys that are tuning in, we're definitely gonna finish up a couple of thoughts here and then wrap it up, and then I want you guys to tune in for part 2. But go ahead.
So to wrap that part up, really, it is to say, what is your faith based on? And we'll tackle foundations later. But is what you say and what you do the same? Mm-hmm. And I think that's tackled throughout the Bible.
Yeah.
We have it in James chapter, all throughout James.
Yep.
Oftentimes it's a man goes to a mirror, looks in it, and when he walks away, immediately forgets
what kind of man he was.
Mm.
What you say and what you do are not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in God, what does that mean? If you believe in the Bible, what does that mean? Do you believe parts of it and I can put parts of it off to the side?
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean it's not important enough for me to dive into it? And that's why I set it aside? Could it be my faith, where it is at, has a certain level of commitment or belief to it based on what I know? Which, as soon as you're a Christian, as soon as you make that step, confess with your mouth, when you believe you have faith, you are at some base level of, I believe for these reasons.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much more. At that point, are you really in the, I want to know, because of my initial proclamation of faith? Is it, I did the thing I thought I needed to do?
On the East, you know.
I can't add much more to that. There's so many things that we could touch on.
Yeah.
The one thing that stuck out to me, and obviously, man, there's too much. One thing that stuck out to me is just the way, like, Justin, you've handled the word faith, and that sticks out to me, and how I want to kind of wrap this up is just the concept that faith should be far more robust and nuanced than wishful thinking. And what I would say to that is just in the way you started off this podcast saying, you know, what are we rooted in? And I think we will discuss this in part 2, but this is definitely what I think is, I'm annoyed that what I read on Reddit was wishful thinking, but I don't blame the person who said wishful thinking because something led to that. Someone's actions led to that.
Or someone's lack of actions.
A lack of action. So the display of faith really did look like wishful thinking. And so I'm actually very excited to dive into with both of you next time of this faith that is beyond just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
One that is far more deadly and active than something that is tossed into the wind.
Yeah. No, I love that you said that because that's where my mind was heading when you were kind of explaining everything that you explained so perfectly. Like, guys, like, I'm so thankful, first and foremost, that Justin's there.
Yes!
And we finally get to give you guys this episode because it's been a long time coming. But yeah, to kind of wrap up on my end too, that's how I look at faith as well. Well, now with all the information that you're giving me, there's two sides to the coin that is faith. There is an active faith and a passive faith. And too many times we see the passivity of the faith play out in reality and in our worlds, and that comes in the form of wishful thinking or just, looking at happenstances that just happen, because you don't have any evidence or the lack of evidence. And then from a theistic point of view, you have that active faith where, yes, we don't have the evidence, but that's actually the fuel that we're going to need to have even more faith because we know that it is true. And we have belief that it is true. And we have truth because of our belief, because of our faith. And like you said, we use it synonymously. Whereas on the other side of the coin, the passive active faith, they don't tie into anything. So I'm really interested in how we're going to take this conversation in the next part. So again, to kind of just wrap up, thank you so much, Justin, for just having this conversation with us. as you guys are listening, if you guys want to continue this conversation with us, definitely tune in and look out for the next episode that's going to be coming out, part 2. And we'll catch you on the next one. Do you guys have any last words to say?
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for listening.
All right.
We'll see you next time, Justin.
Until next time.
All right, see you guys. Peace.